Heraclitus. When it comes to thorny characters, history doesn't present us with a much thornier one than Heraclitus. This pre-Socratic philosopher poured scorn on Pythagoras and Xenophanes and publicly stated that the leaders of Ephesus were so clueless that they ought to hang themselves and let their children run the city. Today, we take a look at the life and thinking of this master antagonist. Heraclitus was born in Ephesus around 535 BCE. At the time, the city was part of the Persian Empire. It is believed that his family held power and privilege in Ephesus. However, very little is known about his life, with the main source being the work of the Greek biographer Diogenes Laertius, who lived at least 200 years after the death of Heraclitus. The only detail that Diogenes provides about the early life of his subject is that he enjoyed playing knucklebones in the Greek temple of Artemis, the Artemisium, which was located in Ephesus. Diogenes portrays the young Heraclitus as some kind of child prodigy, stating that he was brilliant and wondrous. He records that at the same stage, he was called upon to help formulate the laws of the city, but refused. Despite Heraclitus himself claiming that he was totally self-taught, Diogenes tells us he was a student of the Greek philosopher Xenophanes, who he later poured mockery upon. As a young man, Heraclitus established a reputation as a contrarian. He seemed to hold a low, dismissive opinion of everyone and everything. He was also known as the weeping philosopher as a result of his downcast persona. He was certainly a loner who struggled with social interaction. Some historians have even concluded that he suffered from depression. The philosophical ideas of Heraclitus were a radical departure from such previously acclaimed thinkers as Thales of Miletus, Pythagoras, or Xenophon. Yet they proved to be a major influence on many future thinkers. His most famous belief is that everything is in a state of flux or change. He believed that war and struggle between opposites were the eternal condition of the universe. According to Heraclitus, the three main elements of the universe were fire, earth, and water. Fire was the dominant element, being able to control and change the other two. He wrote, "All things are in exchange for fire, and fire for all things." He believed that the cosmic fire had a counterpart in the human soul. In men of weak character, that inner fire is diminished by such watery elements as sleep, stupidity, and vice. However, the virtuous soul has the ability to survive the death of the physical body to rejoin the cosmic fire. In a concept that was very similar to the Oriental belief in yin and yang, Heraclitus developed the concept of dynamism. He contended that dynamism between opposing forces was the driving force and the eternal condition of the universe. Strife and opposition are both necessary, he taught, as the universal tension that they create ensure that none completely dominates the other. In a mirroring of the yin and yang concept, he stated that God is day and night, winter and summer, war and peace, fullness and hunger. Heraclitus's most famous statement was, "You can never step into the same river twice." This reflected his basic belief that the universe was in a state of constant flux. However, his meaning is often misunderstood. He believed that there was underlying unity and consistency in the universe. He stressed that the knowledge we get from our senses and naively believe is observer relative. To illustrate this point, he pointed out that a mountain goes either up or down depending on where you are standing. His underlying point was that real knowledge comes from thinking with the brain rather than simply observing and accepting. It was the apparent inability of his fellow citizens in Ephesus to do so that led him to dismiss them as a bunch of imbeciles. Unlike the rationalist philosophers like Pythagoras, Heraclitus couldn't be bothered explaining the reasoning behind his ideas in detail. As a result, we only have fragments of his works that have come down through time. These are so incomplete that he is known as the Riddler. Those writings that do exist reflect a contemptuous attitude towards the reader. If you can't understand what he's talking about, you aren't worthy of his brilliance. There are strong similarities between the teachings of Heraclitus and the writings of the famous Chinese old master philosopher Lao Tzu of the same era. Historians have speculated that he may have travelled to the Orient, but it is impossible to say one way or the other. The belief that reality is an ever-changing process in constant flux was to stand in stark contrast to the metaphysical physics that would come to dominate under the teaching of Aristotle. Yet, in the early 20th century, philosophers such as Henri-Louis Bergson revived the idea that metaphysics is more a study of process than substances. Throughout his life, Heraclitus was afflicted with dropsy, which is characterized by the buildup of fluid in the arms and legs. Despite consulting many physicians, he was unable to find a cure for the condition. This affliction undoubtedly contributed to his dour countenance. We don't know how Heraclitus died, as Diogenes provides more than one possibility. The most colourful story of his demise has Heraclitus convincing himself that the way to cure his condition was to bury himself in a cowshed, in the belief that the damp, noxious humour that was causing his pain would be drawn from his body. Instead, according to the account, it killed him. An alternative option has him covering his body with a liniment made of cow manure and then lying all day in the sun. Yet another account says that he was attacked and killed by dogs after covering his body with excrement. Although the exact manner of demise will never be known, from the various accounts we can conclude that there was some sort of attempt to alleviate his illness that led to his application of a substance on his body that contributed to his death. Diogenes tells us that he lived for 60 years, which would have put his death around 475 BCE. The scraps of Heraclitus's writings can be read in a book called, appropriately, Fragments. Good luck making sense of it! If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below. And we'll see you next time on History Junkie.